Well, hi, everybody. Everybody's confused over the time change. This is why we need to just kind of stay on standard time all year round. It would make life a whole lot simpler rather than this moving ahead, moving it back. And at least from the standpoint of weather, I kind of like the idea of being able to see the European at more reasonable time if I have to stay up for it. So good morning, everybody. It's a Sunday. I'm started this last week, this idea of doing a Sunday show from home in the morning. So this way I'm not going crazy late in the afternoon and evening figuring out, okay, how am I going to do an evening live stream? Am I going to be able to do a evening live stream? So everybody got their extra hour of sleep. I am sitting here, by the way. What is that? Oh, good God. The live stream is... I have my phone, so that's the other thing I'm doing this morning. So I've got... I'm going to monitor the chat on the phone. I'm drinking I have a double espresso in here, and I got my phone ready so I can see you guys on the chat. And Reaver, you probably, like as I said, you're as frustrated as everybody else with regards to this. Okay, so let us, of course, get things started. I also did a little bit of audio adjusting, so hopefully I'm not hearing the static that was going on last week. Apparently, I had an open audio port. One of the frustrating things about using Windows 10 is that it resets everything when you turn it, at least from the standpoint of my audio settings. It keeps resetting my audio every time I set it, got everything perfect. I come back, I turn the computer back. If I turn the computer on, I shut it down, and to bring it back on, it goes back to the original defaults, and I have to start all over. I don't understand why that is, but gradually figuring it out. I love Microsoft. They give you something that doesn't work right, and then they make themselves look like heroes by pretending that they're fixing something that was never working right to begin with. So anyway, I'm enjoying this. I hope you're enjoying your coffee. Let's talk about the week ahead. The weekend right now, of course, has been a really good one. We've got sunshine. It's been chilly. Just a really typical early November weekend here. Temperatures are averaging a little bit below where they should be. At some places, we're seeing them maybe a little bit above, depending on where you are in the scope of things in the eastern half of the United States. And that really is it. It's very quiet. It's a very benign pattern that we're in. I really don't see too much happening this week going forward. We have two cold fronts coming. Now, one of the things that has become pretty evident in the last 10 days or so, thanks to various runs of weather models, is the beginnings of what I would call weather hysteria season, where every run is going to have a snowstorm somewhere out in the long range. And of course, the proclamations are all over the internet because of what the European did yesterday or the GFS did the day before, and what neither model did for the overnight. Those of you who have been watching here for a long time know how I approach all of this stuff. We have a very methodical view of how weather works. You just follow it along. The modeling is going to take you, the guidance is going to take you in all different sorts of directions with regards to what it sees down the road, and that's what you would expect because of increasing variability over time. But that's not really weather, okay, in a sense. That's not doing the job of forecasting. The forecasting involves figuring out what's going on in front of you, and then how does that change as we move down the road. And I think a lot of people get lost in that. They get they just sort of look at something and they see a snapshot print and they go crazy over it. And I'm just it becomes pretty tiresome after a while, because then you're finding yourself spending more time explaining their errors as opposed to just having to worry about my own. If you follow my logic here, so let's get going here as far as our weather is concerned. I'm going to start with the U.S. satellite today. One of the things you should pay attention to with respect to the overall pattern, watch the flow, okay? Watch the flow on the satellite, watch the flow on the visible and also on the water vapor imagery, because they will tell you a lot about the overall scheme of things and what's going on. And one of the things that I find pretty interesting here is if you watch this loop is aside from the fact that there are no major storms anywhere across the United States, when you look at this, it's all pretty quiet. You are seeing the southern half of this picture, or a little bit more than half, is almost cloud-free. You are seeing the clouds, areas of cloud cover moving across the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. There's a pretty broad flow here from west to east, and what we had is now obviously morphed into something else, and it's just sort of broad flow that is coming down out of Canada, and weather systems are just pretty much moving right along. The old storm from Thursday into Friday, well, that's long gone to the northeast, and we had a little bit of a wave develop on the stalled front, and that has now moved out offshore. So that just pretty much reinforces the dry air that we have overhead. By the way, let me just say really quick hello to of course, all the regulars here, which is great. I want to say special hello to Kathleen Trudy, because you hit Super Chat the other day, and I don't know if I got a chance to thank you for that, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Good morning to Rainbow Citizen, who I think is new. I don't know who they are. Okay, there's always that amorphous meteorological I love being reduced to a pronoun. They said. Okay, so I'm part of this sort of collective they. All right. I don't know who they are. Anybody that would say that now is a fool, even if they wind up being right. Because in my view, it's being right like a broken clock is right, twice a day. And if you got a digital clock, it's only once a day. An old-fashioned clock, it would be twice. Doug Crum, good to see you this morning from down the south, where you've got crystal clear skies in Georgia. Johnny Quest, Lewis Hecht, Charlie Baker. Reaver's relieved because he couldn't figure out with the time zones what the time we were coming on. Let me point out, by the way, that it was kind of an interesting stat that I saw with regards to in the state of Alabama, in the areas around Birmingham, during the month of October, they saw temperatures over 100 and below 32, and apparently that has never, on record anyway, that has never happened in the same calendar month. So it just kind of shows you that we have gone, the rubber band gets stretched in terms of extremes sometimes, and it certainly was stretched in a lot of ways during the month of October with the big heat at the beginning of the month in a lot of places in the south. And remember that whenever the atmosphere does get stretched out at an extreme, somewhere that rubber band's going to snap and produce issues. And of course, we saw the major storms that have impacted the eastern half of the United States. I think we could, call at least two of those storms in the last 2.5 weeks majors, and particularly that severe weather event for Friday was just amazing. I am never, it's very rare that I see whole states dealing with severe thunderstorm warnings, and that's kind of what happened with that. And now you're getting the payback from that, which is the atmosphere settles down, and that's what we have here. Now, this is the high-level water vapor imagery, and it just goes back to the same thing I said a little bit earlier, in that you've got this kind of very broad flow in the upper atmosphere, and this is preventing weather systems, from major systems from happening. You just sort of have this flat west to east flow, and it's a colder flow because its origins are coming down from Canada. And this is the reason why, for example, you have this wave develop off the southeast coast yesterday, well off the southeast coast, and it's just moving right along to the northeast. We don't really see anything coming out of this. So we're moving into a new week. Everything is looking rather calm, and when we take it from the standpoint of even on the radar this morning, there's so little happening with respect to precip. Actually, getting a little bit of lake effect action and a little upper air disturbance, producing some rain and probably a couple of snow showers in the mix. I haven't really looked specifically at the obs up there, but certainly it would be cold enough to at least mix in a few snow showers there in parts of upstate New York. You got a little bit of precip coming out in the northern plains. Those are rain showers, and the rest of the country is very, very quiet. And looking at it from the standpoint of the surface map, you have high pressure, and the coldest air, by the way, has been moving down into the mid-south and southern regions with this. I mean, this is a pretty solid push of chilly air, with temperatures down near the freezing mark. This was as of 7 a.m. So you had temperatures bottoming out in the 20s and low 30s across Louisiana, Mississippi, and in through Alabama, even down into the Florida Panhandle. You're looking at temperatures that, with folks waking up, the temperatures in the 40s and low 50s this morning. So this was a pretty cool push. And the frontal boundary is way down in South Florida. Miami, looks like Miami, Fort Lauderdale sitting on the southern side of that frontal boundary, and everybody else sitting up to the north and participating in a little bit of in cooler air and lower humidity. Out to the west, it really is all about, you still have this thermal low that's down in Arizona. We've been dealing with the strong winds and, of course, the wildfires. But what is a little bit unusual this time around is that a lot of that cold air has been dropping down pretty far to the west. You've got temperatures here, for example, down in parts of Nevada and Utah this morning in the low and mid-teens for lows. So that those windy conditions, that's been cold air that's been blowing around. Many times you get that Santa Ana, you're looking at warm, temperatures that are up at 100 or 105 or 110. This is a little bit different, but the overall scheme of things with regards to what's going on in the West is calmed down. So we have actually, for the first time in many days, no red flag warnings that are up in that part of in California anywhere. So that is good news with respect to that. And you notice even around the country, really not too much happening. Just picking up on the idea that we do have a little bit of lake effect action up in north central New York, north of Syracuse, on the east shores of Lake Ontario, where we're seeing some winter weather advisories posted there. Just want to take a look and see what they're saying, anything with respect to amounts, just for laughs. This really doesn't look like a big deal, or it shouldn't be. 3 to 5 inches in the most persistent lake snows. And those of you who know that area, the Tug Hill Plateau in Oswego, Jefferson, Lewis counties, etc. So getting a little bit of lake effect action in this area, by the way, has gotten an absolute ton of rain from what happened late last week. And of course, you had the usual political gasbaggery that goes on with that sort of stuff. Apparently, the governor of the People's Republic of the state of New York felt the need to inform us yet for a second or third time how we never used to ever get storms like this in New York State. We never got hurricanes, never got tropical storms, ever. Again, this is all according to the governor of the People's Republic of the state of New York. And I just find it astounding. But this is sort of the world I live in, folks. There is a lot of gasbaggery that goes on. So anyway, let's take a look at what the models are doing. I'll take a sip of my coffee here. Let's take a look at the GFS. I'm going to roll it back. One of the nice things, actually, you know what? We'll start with the NAM first to change my mind. We're going to start with the NAM. At this time of day now, the new NAM is already done, and we will probably have at least some of the GFS before the live stream is done. And let's take a look at what's happening. So, we've got our high that's coming toward the East Coast. You can see those disturbances we talked about on the satellite that are rolling across the northern tier through the plains and Great Lakes. And we have another little low here that is moving through the lakes and into western New York. So Monday, while it will be another somewhat chilly day, we'll see temperatures start to moderate a bit going into Tuesday. So we'll bounce back up to about 60 or so. And we do have another weak frontal boundary that is going to be coming through here. There's not a whole lot with this. The energy with this is well up to the north. You're seeing snows in parts of southeastern Canada and north of the Great Lakes. No surprise there. Very little in the way of activity ahead of that front. It's pretty quiet up and down the eastern seaboard, so not overly concerned. And of course, you take a look at the rest of the country through all of this with high pressure out in the west. You're also seeing some very dry conditions continuing there. So this front comes by late Tuesday. Maybe there's a rain shower with it. Maybe there isn't. And then it moves out, and then we get the next high that'll take temperatures back down a little bit on Wednesday, only to be followed by another weather front here, and you can see it trailing back down into West Texas. And of course, you've got this almost 1040 millibar high. That's a pretty strong high that's coming down on Wednesday into the Dakotas. And this is as far as we can go on the NAM, which is 84 hours. But you do have another frontal boundary approaching the east, and it looks like the southern end of that is going to probably feed out some kind of a wave toward the end of the week. Now, one of the big questions you have to ask yourself at this point is, with respect to this high, does it come down and just basically overwhelm and head down, to the Ohio Valley and then start to drop down into the mid and South Atlantic states? Or is it going to make a path a little bit more to the east, where you've got this frontal boundary that just sort of sets up to your south and you get a wave that develops on it and moves eastward? Or do you wind up seeing, something more impressive dropping down in the trough from the north that heads southeastward, that this high instead drops down more in this direction, so that you wind up taking a wave more toward the northeast and perhaps taking it up toward western Pennsylvania or into western New York? Or, and there's one other possibility, that you could wind up just kind of seeing this thing just so overwhelmed in terms of cold air that this frontal boundary just kind of lays there across the south, and it really becomes a non-event, other than the fact that you have to watch for some precip along it in areas across the Gulf states. So there's a lot here that we have to kind of figure out, and I think that's what you spend, whether people that are not into hysterics are going to be looking for clues as to which way this is going to go. And that's kind of where my mindset is at right now. I'm not really particularly interested too much in what the models are doing, because of the fact that there's just too much variability here to contend with everything that's happening. And I want to spend a little bit of time in the upper air to just kind of give you a good view as to what's going on in the overall jet stream pattern. So I'm going to back this up, and I keep losing because this darn thing, I'm trying to keep my phone open so that I can watch you guys on the chat and talk at the same time, which I have to tell you is not the easiest thing to do. Okay, it really isn't. So there you go. All right, so you know what? I'm going to stop for a second. I got this map set up. Izzy, good morning to you. Joe, especially this time of year with this kind of cold, what I was wondering, cold overwhelmed for late week through the weekend. I have a quick burst of precip Thursday night. Well, that front coming through might produce a quick burst of precip. I certainly couldn't argue against it. You're going to see, a temperature bounce into that front arriving. So I doubt that there's anything of consequence with that other than a few rain showers. So it's really sort of what happens after that with respect to the upper trough, and the front, and we're going to get into that right now. So Chuck Cardillo, of course, you're up in the Catskills, so you live in a different world. And that is, and that's a good thing. Okay, I don't want you were 21 this morning, as I remember you telling me on when you messaged me this morning. So you should certainly see your first. You had snow flurries already. I'm not at all surprised. Oh, and we should mention, by the way, thank you, Reaver, for mentioning that. But Levi Cowan of Tropical Tidbits, whose website we use all the time and highly recommend, and he's been great about letting me use this and sharing stuff, and I always give him credit, and well deserved. It also deserves congratulations as he got his PhD, and that is just terrific. Congratulations to you, and lots of luck going forward. So okay, so Ryan Kane, I guess you guys are already talking about what the models are doing back and forth, and God, I'm sorry, it's not you guys. He's back and forth with regards to the models. I just saw David McCain. Okay, look, you're new here, so I'm just going to tell you, and I understand your enthusiasm, and I really do appreciate it, but you need to kind of take it back a bit. I don't close schools. I don't close airports. I don't do any of that stuff. Okay, that is not, that's not what I do. All right, so you're asking me a question. You're asking me questions that I can't answer, all right? I can't answer when there is a snowstorm going on. I certainly can't answer something in theory. So that's a question you have to ask your school district about, okay? So I'm just going to make that clear. And again, this is not about weather hysterics here. I suggest that you just kind of take a step back and watch how things evolve, and you'll learn. Get a feel for how weather works, because extremes in weather occur. They are rare events, not repetitive events. The world would not be an especially nice place to live if every day we were dealing with one form of severe weather or another. Okay, I'm kind of thinking that would just not be an attraction to life on a day-to-day basis. And Christopher, the breast. The answer to your question, you're saying, the European runs showed a snowstorm. Well, it kind of did and it kind of didn't. Do you think it's a fluke, or does it show one of those possibilities? Models are going to do what they're going to do in the longer range, and this is going to get used to it. If this is the next 5 months, we're going to be dealing with this. And you're going to see stuff from run to run go all over the place, which is essentially meaningless from the day-to-day forecasting standpoint. It just is. There's no real way to you can just kind of speak in generalities when you're looking at this sort of stuff, but there's too much going on in the upper atmosphere right now to come to any sort of conclusion about how things are. My own personal feeling is that this is not going to play out to anything significant. Okay. Now, if you want to be cynical about it, you can say that, okay, well, Joe is just kind of given the green light that something is going to happen. So, but from what I'm seeing, and I'll explain why, I'm not particularly bullish right now on what's happening. And the way weather works is things change and you can change your mind. So let's get to this upper air from this morning. Actually, I'll go back to yesterday. And of course, even if going back to Thursday, you can see where you had the storm, our low, our deep low that went up the St. Lawrence Valley, and the trough that follows behind it. And if you look at the overall scheme of things with regards to the flow setting up, you just follow the height line. So they kind of move up from Canada down into the Rockies, and then just sort of bottom out across the Gulf states, and then turn up the East Coast. So this was ahead of the storm this was Thursday evening, right before the severe weather moved through the eastern part of the United States. So if you look at this in a broad sense, you're just saying that air masses that are back up in Canada are going to follow this flow and move into the U.S. And the broadness of the flow kind of tells you that the cold air is relatively extensive in terms of the geographic coverage. It's not just confined to one area of the U.S. in a tight area. If you look at the temperature anomaly here, this was for Friday, except for pockets along the West Coast, virtually the entire country was either near or below average. And that doesn't happen a lot. And even through this weekend, pretty much the same. We're seeing the coverage of below average temperatures, maybe more concentrated east of the Rockies than west, as we look at this on a Sunday morning. So the upper flow this week is going to be doing a couple of different things. Also, one thing to watch is you've got this upper low, and not for tropical reasons, but this upper low that's sitting out here, you have to kind of watch that, because that could sort of impact what's going on off the Atlantic coast in terms of the upper flow. If this winds up being stronger, it could be a reason that drives a deeper trough later this week further to the west. If it just kind of goes away, then, which is what the model seems to be doing here, then that just allows things to just keep moving along in the flow. And you notice as we go into Monday and Tuesday, that flow out of Canada just remains in control. Now, one of the reasons why right now I'm kind of against the idea of anything of consequence happening, there are two reasons. If you look at this, this is on Thursday, you do have a shortwave trough that is moving through. There's another one that's driving behind it. It's hard for me to envision coming out of this. This is one of a number of, there's a couple of possibilities on how this plays. So if you look at this, what happens is that first trough, and this brings a cold front through Thursday night. The next one drops in, and it drops down, and you start seeing all this energy that kind of drops down into the southeast. That is a very suppressed look here. If we were to see something, it would have, of consequence, it's got to drop down much further to the left, back in the west, at least west of 80, if not back in near 85 degrees west. You're not really seeing that from the GFS. It doesn't necessarily mean that the GFS is correct, but I'm pointing out that one of the possibilities here is that you get this energy that's up in northern Canada that drops down in western parts of Hudson Bay and just basically helps to suppress the flow here in the eastern part of the United States. The other thing to look at in the longer term that I think is important is watch this trough at 160. We've been talking about this for a while. You get the trough at 160. That wants to favor troughing in the eastern part of the United States. It is something that the two things sort of go hand in hand. It's something that the teleconnections have been hinting at, and I want to talk about that in a bit as well. So you got that trough at 160, so it wants to make the trough, somewhere in the eastern part of the United States. The problem is the east is a big, when I say the eastern part of the United States, it doesn't exactly say where in the east, okay? There's a big difference between having a trough in the east. If we divide the U.S. in half and say, east and west. So if you have a trough in the east, is the trough at 85? Is it at 80? Is it at 75 or 70? All those positions make a huge difference in terms of outcome and as far as day-to-day weather is concerned. This, to me, suggests that there's just a little bit too much suppression. Now, as we go through the weekend and into early next week, at this point, we do see troughing driving down far enough west back through the Great Lakes, where I think that at that point, and now we're looking at, say, a week from tomorrow or Tuesday, out of this, we might see something a bit more important develop. Now, I'm not saying anything beyond that. Don't automatically assume that when I say something like that I'm talking about snow, but I am talking about some kind of weather system, be it a low that's in the lakes with a cold front, that has some punch to it, or maybe it would mean something a bit, a bit further south. Hard to say, but that actually, at least from the standpoint of the GFS, is a pretty impressive looking trough. So what the GFS is actually saying is that there's very little room for anything at the end of the week, other than this cold frontal passage, and then you watch to see if a wave goes by. It wants to carry that wave out to our south, and well to the south. Maybe in some of the mountains in West Virginia, Western North Carolina, which is what the GFS shows out of a scenario like this. Perhaps that could mean some snows there, but I'm really just not particularly excited about it. The next round does have a bit more room because it does drop further to the west. So I think that's what we'll have to watch for, is a week from today. And also, when you look at the general upper air signature as we go through the first half of the month, you still seem to want to have a tendency for troughing there out at about 160 degrees west near where Hawaii is. It's actually a split flow. If you look at the flow itself, there's two main pushes. One that's coming down from Canada like this, and then you have this southern part of the flow with weather systems moving along. So the split flows are very interesting. I tend to find that split flows in some instances can produce some rather robust weather events going forward, and they have to be paid attention to. Again, the key is where are the fronts in all of this? Where are the troughs? I'm sorry. Where are the troughs in all of this exactly? They need to set up, obviously, in a certain way, in a certain geographic position, to have the maximum amount of input for your particular area, whether you're along the coast or whether you're inland. So that to me is where we're at. And as we look on the longer range, and this is from the 6Z model run, we do see, still see this tendency for troughing out at 160, which wants to make the trough in the eastern part of the United States. You got a couple of short waves running around here. I wouldn't look at anything really super specific here, just again the general idea. And then as we head toward the end of the period, still seeing a tendency for troughing in the east, because you're still seeing a tendency for troughing out at 160 west. You still have a bit of a split flow going on. So the upper air is kind of telling us that things are going to be benign for much of this week. I'm not particularly bullish going into the end of the week and into the weekend, and we may start to see things pick up next week, and perhaps the second half of the month may wind up being a little more, a bit more active than the first. You're starting to see a bit of amplitude here, by the way, in the longer range. More of a ridge popping up in the west, a little bit more amplitude with the troughs coming into the eastern part of the United States. So why don't we just take a look now at the surface map. Let's bring up, by the way, the European, before we do that. So the European is not that different with respect to things. By the way, you can just kind of see where the front is when you look at these things on temperature anomaly maps. You have below normal off the East Coast and up in eastern Canada. You have below normal coming back into the plains. And then you have this little area of near normal. This is for Monday night, Tuesday. I'm just illustrating here of near normal in between. So it's ups, kind of ups and downs. So you see variation in temperatures going a little bit above average and to a little bit below average, and no great shakes here. But when we look at the European in terms of its upper air, we are seeing, we are seeing the same concept here, where you've got this trough in the east. It really doesn't. It kind of drives it south. It looks sort of like the same idea with the GFS, where you just don't have a lot of room here with what's happening. What you would need to see if you're talking about something for the end of the week and into the weekend, and I mentioned this earlier, what you really would need to see is some space in between, a little bit of ridging developing in between the upper low that is sitting east of Labrador here, and this next energy that is dropping down. If you could get, if you get ridging here and you get this trough to drop down further southeast, further to the southeast, and do it further to the west, then you might have something. But it's hard to see how you're going to have something if this thing is out here. It just kind of keeps things a little bit flat. So you got, and the model responds to that by dropping that next trough is right along the east coast, but it's broad and it's flat. If anything is here, it's going to get suppressed out offshore to the south and east, and then it's just cold and dry. And of course, you see how the European, much like the GFS, drops the next trough, although it seems to want to do it in almost the same place as the first one. The GFS is much further to the left. So you got to get that energy to kind of come down, at least down into the Great Lakes, in that Great Lakes area. But one of the things that I'm noticing, at least from the standpoint of the two models, is they both seem to want to keep this trough out at 160, which I think is important in the scope of things as far as the long term is concerned. So let me get rid of this for one moment. Let's get to I'm going to bring up the surface map. And while I'm setting that up, hang on one second. So we'll run this back in a moment. I'm just taking a look at some of your comments here. Why has the euro been so off recently? Did they do an upgrade or something? Asked Brandon Doherty. Well, I would just look at it this way. If you're looking for models to give you an absolute answer on every single run that comes out, it's just not going to happen. That's not what that's not what you should be looking for. What you really should be looking at the scope of the pattern that it has. I would stay away from snowfall forecast maps. When I have put them up, I have always made the point to say that this is just basically what, this is, rather than look at it in terms of specific numbers, which you can't really do, look at it in terms of how they describe how they reflect the overall pattern in a very general sense. That's why when I show them, I usually try to show the North America view, so you can't go in there and look at some specific number. They're meaningless, all right? And from a forecast tool standpoint, they're kind of meaningless. I much rather would figure out how much precip we're going to get out of it and do it the old-fashioned way. The snow maps just are not good tools. They really aren't. So, you become reactive every 12 hours or every 6 hours, and it takes too much emotion out of you, if you ask me. So I would instead kind of get a flavor for what's going on in the upper air so that you can get a sense of where we're going. And right now, it's hard for me to envision how you've had a couple of these model runs showing, all this snow all over the place. It's hard for me to see that with regards to what I'm seeing in terms of the upper air. And, that's just how I look at it. I may come on tomorrow and I might change my mind, which I think is a far better approach to things than to just unequivocally say 10 days from now, as some people have, that we have an impending snowstorm. I mean, that's just so ridiculous, okay? What are you going to do if that is the case? First of all, snow melts. Second of all, if you're inconvenienced by it, it's not really a big inconvenience in the scope of life, okay? So you deal with it, and it's not as if you're going to pack up and move. So, and it to me, it's just silly. Mr. Briller, the chairman, is on, who had set a record yesterday. One of the things I did yesterday was I pre-scheduled today's live stream almost 24 hours in advance. So Mr. Briller has the record now of being, the first person and waiting the longest. Although I don't believe, Scott, you were on nonstop. I know you weren't. I'm just breaking chops a little bit. You picked up your cat, Snowball. Odd that you should have a cat named Snowball, because years ago I did also. Vet after had surgery for skin cancer. Just remember, Central Park has only had 3 5-inch snowstorms in November. That's a good point, by the way. I'm glad to hear your cat's gone through surgery, and hope snowball gets better. But that's another thing. You've got a lot of climo working against you here. So to set up for any snow in the east this time of year has got to be absolutely perfect. Christina Pedia is on. Norma Belshaw, nice to see you, by the way. Okay, so Stephen White. Yeah, I will say this about December, Stephen White. And Johnny Quest, thanks for having my back. I really appreciate it. But here's what I'll say about the way I'm thinking. We've got a benign period right now. I think maybe activity picks up toward the latter part of November. I'm looking at the overall flow in the Pacific. It's not like it was last year, so it's not like we're seeing a screaming Pacific jet. So I think that makes things a bit different. I also am seeing a tendency for the trough to want to be in the east, which is an interesting phenomena. And I'm thinking that maybe we might see some action in December, from the standpoint of snow chances, and not just a coating to an inch type snow chances. At least something, one or two attempts at something moderately significant. How's that for a forecast? That's, I think, the best you're going to get out of me as far as a long range is concerned. And it's purely a guess based on, what I'm seeing in terms of the overall flavor of the pattern at this point. So watching this week this is from the 6Z GFS. We only are now starting to get the 12Z in. We do have another front. We have a weak one that comes through on Tuesday, produces some rain showers up through upstate New York and New England because, the air ahead, it's chilly out there, but it's not Arctic. Second front comes through, brings in another shot of colder air for Wednesday into Thursday. Here comes the next cold front for Thursday afternoon. High builds in, and here's where you get that suppression where you're getting all this energy that the model's trying to generate across the southern tier, pushing it almost straight east off the South Carolina coast. You don't have, by the way, one very important thing that we should point out too is, one of the things that you want to see, if you're going to have something move up the East Coast, you have to have a reason for it to climb, okay? And that reason is what you need to have is you need to have storms out here. And if you look at the overall flow, you do have weather systems that are moving along, and that's just it. They are moving along. It's progressive from west to east. You need traffic that is moving, is out there and is just kind of sitting out there. That's why that upper low that was in this position here was kind of important, because at least that would have perhaps closed off an exit way for any kind of wave to move out and force a system to go to climb up a bit up the eastern seaboard to perhaps look for a better alleyway. Instead, it's not there. So if you watch this on the excuse me, on this view, the Atlantic, you're not really seeing very much. You're seeing storms, but they're up, one in east of Labrador, another one south of Iceland heading toward England. And that means that this next wave, this wave in the south, winds up moving, mostly to the east or east-northeast. So it can't climb, all right? That is the consequence of having a very broad pattern in the eastern part of the United States. Big thank you to Paul Roman. Thanks for hitting Super Chat, Paul, this morning. I really appreciate it. And Brandon Doherty, thank you for hitting Super Chat. And Izzy D, thank you for hitting Super Chat this morning. Paul, you're up in Ulster County, so you are in the land of Chuck Cardillo, trying to stay warm on a cold morning. Steve LaPointe, in New York City, that does not even buy a cup of coffee. Well, no, it's the principle of the thing. I appreciate anybody that hits Super Chat. Thank you so much. It helps. Okay, it really does. I get a cigar or a cup of coffee out of it. I'm a happy man. Let's see, 47. Paul Roman, you're in Stroudsburg, PA today. Oh, very nice. You going to the Railroad Museum there, which would be kind of cool. anyway, Billy Johnson, the only thing I would worry about if we get a major snowstorm at this time of year is widespread power outages because of leaves. That's a good point. We still have a lot of leaves on the trees, so you don't want really to have anything of consequence now. Plus, I honestly don't want to have to go through another round of political gasbaggery like we had last year with the snow that fell on November 15th, what I would call the predicted snowfall, or the ones that the local town officials chose not to pay attention to. What was left out as weather people were being thrown under the bus left and right was the fact that, and I made this point many times, I guess it's worth reminding everybody that most municipalities in the Northeast, particularly in the coastal Northeast, I don't know about the inland areas way up in upstate New York. I would think that for those folks who know what snow, how to deal with snow and not be babies about it, this is something that doesn't apply. But municipalities in the coastal Northeast down into the northern mid-Atlantic states, they do not budget for November snow removal because most Novembers you don't get any. So they don't budget for it. So they kind of got caught flat-footed where, okay, so we've got this problem where we might need, salting and snow removal, and, well, we don't have it in the budget to do it. So that's what was behind it. There was no budget for it, okay? It would have required authorization of massive amounts of overtime, and they're not going to do it. So, that's what that was about. So November snows are rare and they are tough. Steve LaPointe, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat. I really, really appreciate it greatly. Thank you so much. Yes, 30 years. It's hard to believe. Yeah, it's been actually 33 years since I started at News 12 in December of 1986. So that's 33 years of watching how we do weather change in such an incredible way. With technology, the advent of the internet, of course, and everything else. So I really appreciate that. David Schwartz, thank you very much also for hitting Super Chat. We get that weather hyperbole from all politicians and not just Cuomo. Absolutely. You got to throw somebody under the bus. That's what they do. That's all they do. And it just gets tiresome after a while to hear just, utter gasbaggery being uttered in every direction. And I think everybody on this that watches a live stream like this understands that it's all nonsense. But it's kind of hard to see that being played publicly because the average person, they're not really, if they're not interested in weather, if they're not weather savvy, they're just gonna kind of go with the flow. And anyway, so let's roll this out. So you got the GFS with the high in Western New York. It moves in. Look, the one thing I will say from a standpoint of, at least if this winds up verifying, it is going to be cold in New England and into the northern mid-Atlantic states with a setup like this and a high to the north. So that low goes out. We will then bounce up again. Another cold front comes in, and this is now at the point we're at is around Tuesday, the 11th and 12th. This is where I think you'll have to just watch to see how the model evolves here at this time frame with the shortwave, if it winds up being shorter and further to the left, deeper and further to the left. And it's more of the same until you get toward, the latter part of the forecast period. You start get past mid-month, maybe something more important then. But you're getting, one of the things that's interesting to me is the fact that you're getting this kind of consistent flow of cold fronts coming down from Canada. So at least we're seeing the delivery of chilly air masses coming down. For snow lovers, the only thing I would say to you both, to all of you snow lovers, the one thing I will say to you with regards to this is that this is an evolutionary process that we're in right now with respect to what's happening weather-wise. So just remember that. It's kind of a let's watch, wait, and see where we're at, where we're going as far as the long term is concerned, and let's try not to be reactive to these sort of run-to-run fluctuations as far as what models are going to be, are going to be showing showing us. Hey, Izzy, I'll try to buy you guys a Snowfall. Okay, I really will. But we'll see. Johnny Quest, thanks for hitting super chat also, and Izzy, you hit it again, and I really appreciate it from both of you. Thank you. Refill on the coffee. You know what? I'm just gonna hang on one second. Don't go away. I'm gonna come to the chat board here. I just did actually, but let me come to the chat board, and I'm just gonna reheat my espresso, and I'll take a few more questions because we got time. Somebody play the Jeopardy song. So hang on one second. BRB. Da 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 da. All right, I'm coming. Hang on. Believe it or not, by the way, most people don't realize this. Espresso, when the way it's supposed to be drunk, which is not out of a mug like this, okay? It's a small shot of espresso. It actually has 1/3 of the caffeine of a regular standard U.S. cup of coffee, okay? And judging how people usually, when they drink coffee, they call it 1 cup, and it's really more like 3. I mean, this is actually probably the equivalent of 2 American cups of coffee if it was filled to the top, which it's not. All right, but there's actually less caffeine. It goes through you a lot faster. The dark roasts have less caffeine than lighter roasts. So if you want to drink coffee in the morning to keep you awake, you drink a light roast coffee. If you want a coffee in the evening, not so that it doesn't keep you awake, then you drink a dark roast coffee. So I can actually drink an espresso and have no problem sleeping. Maybe not necessarily right before I go to bed, but if I have some espresso 2 or 3 hours before normal bedtime, I don't have a problem. If I have a regular cup of coffee, I'm up all night. So, let's see. David, you can't have caffeine, so understandably so. You like the Jeopardy music. Great, I'm glad. Scott Patton, hope we get a blizzard this year. Look, you kind of look at things in terms of what we've been dealing with from last winter. Bear in mind, by the way, there's nothing that says we can't have 2 below average winters in a row in terms of snowfall. Now, if you go back to 1990, from 1996, 97, 97, 98, 98, 99, 99, 2000, you had 4, okay, in a row. So, and there are instances littered all across New York City weather statistics that show there are far more below average snowfall years than there are above average. It's just that we've been really spoiled in the last 19 or 20 years in that we've only had a handful of below average winters. In fact, last winter we've only had 1, 3, 4. For a lot of areas in the Northeast, last winter was only the 5th below average winter out of the last 19. So 14 above and 5 below. That's about as bullish as you're ever going to get. So if we ever revert back to the mean, one of these decades we're going to revert back to the mean, which is that snowfalls are harder to come by along the immediate coast in more winters than not. Do I think the cold air mass that settles in for later this week is out of the question and we get some snow showers or perhaps squalls that would be more confined to Great Lakes? I don't know. I mean, look, at any time now, we're going to see the first round of flurries and snow showers in one form or another. So it's quite possible. That's a super short range problem. Ryan, So it's certainly, it's possible that somewhere along the line in the next couple of weeks we'll have something come along and produce the first flakes in the air, which is always nice to see. Christinapedia, I drink my espresso. It's like straight black. Okay, so but you do so no creamer for me. Although you do half and half when I have regular coffee. And you do a mix with decaf. I used to do that with the regular coffee. Used to go 50-50 or 60-40. It does work. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, Stephen White, if December winds up being colder in the Northeast. November's usually like to carry along with some persistence. So perhaps we are in for something of consequence with regards to December. We'll see. I'll be curious to see, where we are at the end of November, the latter part of November, particularly as we get into the last week of November, to see what the upper pattern looks like. I just hope that we don't have it all just kind of between now and the end of December, and then suddenly come January we flip a switch and we're running 3 to 5 degrees above average. Who knows? It's hard to see. It's very hard to see right now whether it's a question of persistence or variability in the overall scheme of things. I kind of think that there will be variability this winter, which would make it sort of typical. I'm not hot. I'm sorry. That's not the right word, but warmer than average at times, colder than average at times. Some stretches that go a little longer than others, and opportunities for snow peppered in the mix. I think that is a safe way to look at things. But in terms of the overall specifics, no one's ever going to be able to tell you. No one's going to tell you correctly, and if they do, they're guessing. Stephen Franco, nice to see you on board, buddy. I wonder if we will get a chance to get some sound. I have to tell you, you bring up Long Island sound effects snows. I really like when it happens. It doesn't happen often. Usually, you get Long Island sound effects snows when you have a wind, an Arctic air mass, a really, really deep Arctic air mass, and a north wind that comes off the sound. And you kind of see these really small, dark clouds that form, this low cumulus that forms, and they just kind of come in off the water. And if you watch them, if you've got some elevation, which you do have out here on Long Island, we're not some flat, it's not, it's everybody seems to think it's flat out at Long Island, and it's not. But if you can go where there's some elevation, like if you went up, say, Bald Hill, which is 450 feet up, and you look out to the north, and you can watch it. It almost looks like you see these little waves, these wall waves that come in. They're a lot of fun, and over the years, on certain occasions, I've seen some pretty, quick couple of inches come in from Long Island sound effect snows. They're rare, but they do happen. Haven't seen them. I think there was one. There were a couple of days last winter where we saw that in some of the colder air masses that came down. But I really like to see. They tend to set up in winters where you've got really persistent cold going on. Those really tough winters like 13, 14, 14, 15. You see those Long Island sound effect snows. Does seem, Izzy, by the way, yes, with everything that's going on after last Thursday's severe weather, where this was the second time in the last number of months where I saw the entire state of New Jersey was under a severe thunderstorm warning at the same time. Every single county. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. Reaver wants to know, do I use a special machine to make espresso? No, actually, we have an old espresso coffee pot. It's got to be, 30 years old or more, maybe a little bit less. It's an old Italian espresso pot. In fact, I can show it to you. Hang on one second. You get a lot of stuff on this show. So here's my... This is an old Italian espresso pot. You don't need an espresso machine, okay? You really don't. You get one of these old pots. You can buy them. Probably you'll have it at Bed Bath and Beyond, or if you go to, if you're in New York City, go to any of the Italian areas. If you go to Arthur Avenue, for example, or look, you can find this stuff probably you certainly can find it online. This pot, okay, you put the coffee in, you put you put your water in there, and then you put it on the top of the stove, and you wait for it to boil through, and it's perfect. You don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a machine and then the pods that go with it in order to make espresso. At the end of the day, this is the easiest way to do it. Joe Maiano, your parents have the same espresso. It's fairly straightforward. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I had growing up, okay? I think my mother still might even have the same espresso pot maker that she had like 50 or 60 years ago. I know she still has some of the same utensils, which is astounding. That stuff lasts. And that's one thing I would just say for those of you who like to cook, okay, which I do. If you're going, don't try to skimp on the cooking tools that you use. Buy a good cast iron skillet. Buy good solid tools. If you've got to spend extra money, it is well worth it. Chuck, I just saw, did you comment somewhere here? There you go. Remember saying the weather in November and the rest of the winter will remember. It does. November has a lot of, is a good month to look at for an indicator. It doesn't always tell you what's happening, or it doesn't always hold in terms of the overall pattern, but it might be a very good indicator of how the general pattern is going to be, and then we can start looking for how things rhyme. Christinapedia, I have a $20 gift, Family Dollar coffee pot for years. Works great. Keurig is overrated and 5 times more. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's exactly correct. And you know what? Makes far better coffee, okay? Old-fashioned percolator coffee, far better coffee. And and the other funny thing is, what's old is new. So, if you go back and find some of the stuff that your parents had, or if you find them at yard sales, then they get repackaged and sold now, and they're sold for 5-6 times what they used to sell for, or more, 10 times. For the novelty of it, or because it's in style. But look, if you can get your hands on some of the old-fashioned stuff, it works just as well, if not better, than some of the new stuff. It's a matter of convenience. I understand that, but it does require a little bit of extra effort on your part when you're making coffee, making espresso. So big deal. You got to take a spoon and put your coffee inside the pot and fill it up with water. There are more difficult. There are a struggle. I know, but I think we can measure that. We can handle that. Ripped jeans are in. Yeah, I never got that. You can actually sell ripped jeans online to certain places overseas and sell them for hundreds of dollars for a pair. I've got a ton of those upstairs. I should probably just put them in eBay, and they were ripped from working out in the yard and not necessarily for style. They weren't ripped for stylish reasons, I assure you. More than likely, I just grew out of them. Greatest Generation, yeah, kind of. Reaver grew up in Italy during the war, actually. So was in a child during World War II. While the war was going on. So that's part of my life story, because I'm a first generation Italian here. The glass Pyrex coffee pots, Chuck Cardillo. I think I've seen one running around in here somewhere. amazing. But like I said, what's old is new, and what's new is new. Let's see. Soon you don't have to drive on that third world road, the Long Island Expressway, when you want. Yeah, oh my God, that is such a plus, and I'm glad I'm not going to have to do it. I drive 65 miles each way. For those of you who might, maybe not have heard, I am going to be done with Fios One News in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from Friday. I'm sorry. So there's just this coming Friday and next Friday. So the 15th, November 15th, is my last day, and then it's time to go online 24/7, which is what I'm going to be doing. So you're going to see, more online stuff. Everything. Nothing changes here, by the way, at all with respect to YouTube, live streams, and everything else. That stays the same. So we're fine. If anything, I'll be doing more stuff via my apps, via my Patreon platform, and a few other things. So just pay attention going for the next couple of weeks. We'll be maneuvering, and you will, if you like what I do now, I think you're going to like what I will be doing even more. Okay, so to wrap it up, because we are now at 11:06, why don't we just give me 1 second here. I'm going to take a look at how much of the new GFS we have and see. I'm liking these Sunday morning live streams. The whole concept of this Sunday morning live stream to me is it works. Okay, so, I mean, unless I have some kind of scheduling issue going on, which I would probably know about ahead of time, this is going to be a regular thing now. Rather than do one at night, we'll do one during the day. So you could already see, by the way, I just kind of jumped off. This is Saturday morning, so it's already got this next thing going by to our south. So let's take a look at, what this all means, on the new run. And one of the things about this morning run, by the way, at least on a Sunday, is, with the time change now, everything's an hour earlier. So when we get to the end of the live stream, we'll get some of the new GFS anyway. So here's our weather front that moves through here for Tuesday. No change there. You've got another front that approaches for Thursday, and this kind of flattish wave that goes by to the south and moves off the South Carolina, North Carolina coast. Cold air with the high trying to wedge in with a northeast wind. But, my suspicion is that there's no lift. And in fact, when you look at the upper air, you can see you continue to have the suppressed nature of this trough in the east. It needs to drive in further west, okay? As a point of comparison, okay, I'm going to go back 2 model runs. All right, so let's go back 2 model runs. So this is the GFS from last night, the 0Z run, okay? And I'm going to put, in fact, you know what? It probably will work better if I do it on this one. So let me outline what the GFS is doing here. So let's follow our flow. There you go. So here's the jet stream. This is for Friday afternoon. There's a shortwave trough right here. Okay, you get a little bit of a ridge that is trying to pop up there in the west, but this is your basic flow. That was 2 runs ago. Okay, so let's match it up. Let's get rid of, let's go back. Let's go now to the current run. And you'll notice I'm going to put things on here again. Whoops. There we go. So from the old run to the new run, what I'm seeing to me is that the old run is now, I laid it over in red. So the changes are going to be subtle here. They're not going to be huge. But one of the things I am noticing is that the new trough, which I'll draw in a different color, I'll use blue. Trying to find something that stands out. But the new run, it looks like the short wave is a little bit flatter and actually a bit more suppressed in nature The northern part of the jet is also moving along and a bit more suppressed as well. You can see a little bit of action there. So this kind of argues that the models are going to try and suppress things to the south, and it's going to be difficult to lift up something along the East Coast, again, when you have nothing in terms of traffic out here to drive something northward. Just watching how everything, the low near Greenland moves out to the northeast. You've got the Thursday low. The Thursday low moves into New England and moves off and keeps going and goodbye. And then, of course, you've got this next thing, suppressed to the south, that moves out to the northeast. You got to get some traffic out there in the Atlantic in order to get something to get closed off. If you think back a couple of storms ago, at least with respect to, I think it probably was with Nestor, the non-tropical system that Nestor turned into, the post-tropical system, was able to climb because there was stuff going on off the east coast of the United States out toward Bermuda. That it was another low that was forming out there, if I remember correctly, and it kept Nestor from moving out and instead forced it to climb northward. So that wound up pushing a wall of rain much further north than it otherwise would be. You just don't have that here. So I'm just not really, as I said earlier, I'm just not really particularly bullish with regards to action toward the end of the week. But I have an open mind. If we see that the upper air is going to evolve a little bit differently, then we will, of course, be more than happy to change our minds and adjust the forecast accordingly. So I would say, Reaver, in summary, that it would mean that if you get that flatter look, nothing what you saw in some of the earlier model runs, taking a load of the, well up into the northeast is going to happen, and it's just going to be much ado about nothing. Last question of the day for Trish and Lou. Do I see accumulating snow early week in west central Wisconsin? La Crosse, what model would you recommend for cold temperatures and winter storms for the winter? The second question first, I would recommend the model that works. And I don't mean that to be, smart ass here, but some models are going to work under certain circumstances, and some others are going to work in other circumstances. So you're going to have to just kind of take a look at all of them. If you need something in terms of generalities, you could. Any one of them is going to give you a general idea of what's going to happen. The further out in time you go with any model, I don't care how good it is going to give you a large degree of variability. And I certainly would not, beyond the 3 or 4 day period, it's going to be kind of hard to, gain any kind of faith in terms of specifics. Now, as far as snow is concerned, look, there could be the system for Monday that moves across the Great Lakes isn't anything to write home about. The one for Wednesday, which becomes the cold front in the east on Thursday, that could produce, that could be a coating to a couple for you up there. And then it turns cold behind it. After that, we're kind of dice rolling here because you got to, after the next high moves to the east, there's a little bit of warm advection that's coming up. So that might produce some warm frontal snows setting up for, say, next weekend. But not, to me, nothing at this point looks like it's going to be anything that's a very big deal. So, Farva, thank you for hitting Super Chat. Yes, I will be your friend. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing that. So let's wrap things up. Shelly Man Studios is on, and he got on a little bit late. Yeah, we've been on since 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. That is going to be what we're going to do here every Sunday, okay? So we'll go every Sunday, 10 a.m. I think these morning live stream coffee things will work. I hope you guys are enjoying it. We can have it in a much more relaxed fashion. And there'll be no live stream tonight, but I'll probably do a Weather in 5 that'll show up sometime later this evening to set you up for the week ahead. So thanks very much for being here today. I just realized, too, I did not let my app folks, because I did actually put the live stream, I set it up on the app, but I forgot to hit the, I forgot to send the notification out. Shame on me. So let's talk about the where we're going. Doug Crump, thanks for being here as always from down in the great state of Georgia. Scott Briller, good to see you on board. Hope everybody enjoyed their breakfast and their Sunday morning. So download my free weather apps on Google Play or on the App Store. The meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app and the Angry Ben weather app, the Angry Weatherman. Both default to your location, by the way. So while I do concentrate a lot on my zone of coverage, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, you can pull up your local conditions and your local forecast if you like. You know, if you need to see icons, you can do that. Okay, so no problem there. So just go to Google Play or the App Store, put in meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or put in the Angry Weatherman, and download. They're both free. And for those of you who want a more extensive weather experience, there's always my weather platform on Patreon, which is a subscription platform that starts at just $2 a month. And if you'd like to support what I'm doing, by the way, on all these things with apps and social media and everything else, my 3 websites, and this is really the best way to do it. You can just message me at any time. When weather gets active, we do special videos just for Patreon members. And I do respond, by the way, to messages in a timely manner. I do not respond to a timely manner to non-Patreon messages that come out via Facebook. So I'm just letting you know that. But by all means, it's just $2 a month, and it really does go a long way. Plus, you're really on top of weather because it's going to be that's going to be my world going forward. So there's a link up there on the live stream. And just one other way, very quickly, if you like to support my channel, an easy way to do it where it doesn't cost you anything is if you shop on Amazon, because I do have a link to Amazon. It's on the descriptor to this live stream, or if you're watching this on a replay, the descriptor to this video. And we're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, which is a affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and affiliated sites. So if you shop on Amazon, just buy what you want, just search and shop. You don't have to buy what's on there. Just search and shop, and Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin, and it keeps me happy. And thank you for those of you who have done that. Izzy D, Brandon Doherty, Paul Roman, Steve LaPointe, David Schwartz, Johnny Quest, Izzy D again, and Farva. Thank you very much for hitting Super Chat. Really appreciate it. Look for Weather in 5 sometime tonight. Watch your hope your football teams all win today, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye, everybody.